So welcome everybody once again at this Brewing the American Dream webinar. It's presented today in partnership with Accion Opportunity Fund and Samuel Adams. My name is Meredith Medlin-Dooley, and I'm the Senior Director of Business Education here at Accion Opportunity Fund, or AOF. We're a national nonprofit organization committed to providing affordable capital and business educational resources to entrepreneurs across the country. I think a lot of you are probably already familiar with us, but if you're not familiar with AOF's work, please take some time to get to know us. We'd love to get to know you. I just put a link to our website into the chat for you, so feel free to check that out. Our team at AOF is so grateful to our national food and beverage partners at Samuel Adams for their commitment to small business that they share with us. As many of you probably know, since 2008, our organizations have partnered on the Brewing the American Dream program, and we've been providing capital, coaching, access to networks, promotional opportunities, all sorts of things to business owners across the country. We've provided this type of educational experience as well as best-in-class business coaching, mentorship to more than 13,000 business owners since the program began. And so I'm sure you can tell that this is just one of many examples of Sam Adams' commitment to that small craft food and beverage type of business that we're so glad to be partnered on. And we're really excited that each of you today is taking part in this wonderful program. So to get us started, I'm just very quickly going to introduce the experts who are joining me today who are on screen. So first, Angela Taylor is the Wellness Coordinator and a board member of the Garfield Park Community Council in Chicago, Illinois. She's had a full career at the Illinois Department of Human Services, and now Angela has really taken on leadership roles within the Community Council, specifically focusing on community gardens and the neighborhood market. We're so glad that you're here with us today, Angela. Thanks for being here. All right, and next, Heather Younger is the CEO, Chief Everything Officer, I love that, at Boston-based Top Shelf Cookies, which is a local cookie bakery founded in 2014 on the love of all things Boston. Heather makes cookies in various flavors, and they're not only unique and super interesting, but I can say from personal experience, they're absolutely delicious. We're really glad to have you here, Heather. All right, and next, Sheree Moratto is an avid supporter of entrepreneurship and community development. She manages sustainability and capital access programs for the Rogers Park Business Alliance in Chicago, Illinois, and she founded the Chicago Farmers Market Collective in 2018, among so many other contributions and achievements. We're excited that you're here with us as well, Sheree. And Uli Nasibova is the founder of Uli's Gelato in Los Angeles, California. She's originally from Azerbaijan, and she came to the US for college and started, like so many entrepreneurs, in sort of a traditional professional career. And then, lucky for all of us, she founded Uli's Gelato in 2014 to really follow her passion. The gelato is fresh, made with lots of seasonal ingredients, many of which are sourced from local farmers markets there in Southern California. So thank you so much for being here, Uli. All right, enough for me. Let's get started with our conversation about farmers markets. So kind of starting from square one, Heather, I'd love to hear from you about how you decided that selling in a farmer's market would be a good fit for your business.
Sure. So I would say, first and foremost, I started my business out of a shared kitchen. So I didn't have a storefront. I had no way for people to find me. So I kind of had to go to the people. Like, we actually used to joke, like, people would call us like cookie carnies. So wherever we could pop up a tent, that's where you would find us. But also, you know, Boston's a big city, but it's a city of neighborhoods. So for us, like, getting to know the different neighborhoods in our city, which are very different, was important to me, because it would help me say, okay, you know, this cookie slays in Dorchester, but not so much in Jamaica Plain, you know? And so for us to get to know the people in the neighborhood who were aligned with our values as a company, which we are very Boston based, we're very neighborhood based, was huge for us. And from a business perspective, I mean, you can't get better paid market research, right? So like, there's nobody in between you and the buyer. It's you and the buyer and your product. And you'll know if you say, hey, I got this hot sauce cookie today, and they're like, no, thank you, right? Or if you say, hey, I've got this carrot cake cookie today, and they're like, oh, I'd like to try that. So you get a sense of how people will react to your product, and you can decide like, hey, is this a good thing or a bad thing? And do I want to move forward with it? And it's going to hit differently in different neighborhoods. Just even in our city, like there's certain things that we don't bring to certain neighborhoods because we're like, nope, not going to sell there. And so that for me, and I like the fact that we've gotten to be such a part of the community in Boston. You know, we're getting ready to do our biggest event we've ever done this week. And I think I've got 3 other vendors that are like my farmers market buddies that are either advising me or helping drive stuff into my load in, because like I'm not really built for this. Like I don't do giant caterings and things like that, but they were happy to say, I have a freezer I can loan you. And you know, we don't do it for the what people give us, but you know, I was reminded last night when I was apologizing to this person for taking so much of their time. They said, he goes, you give a lot to us. We're happy to help you, you know? And I think like being an entrepreneur is a really lonely job. And like, so if your company is small, you can build your own coworkers, right? Like, I mean, Q's Nuts in Somerville, they're probably our best friends. So we travel around with them all the time. And he's like, I got a freezer for you. I'll come down, I'll bring it in a van. But that's what we have all the time. So that community is helpful when you're having a rough day, because that person's going to help you out or make you smile or whatever. And it can make this grind of doing this work really, really great. And again, it's a great way to get to know the people in your neighborhood.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I love that. Thanks so much for sharing, Heather. All right, so getting down to actually managing the operations of the farmers market booth or the festival spot, you know, the pop-up shop, any of those kinds of things. I'm definitely not an expert, but I can tell even as a customer, it's a lot of work for the business owner and for any staff who are involved. So what tips or tricks can you share about just making the running of it as simple as possible? Heather, I'd love to hear from you. And then Uli, I'd like to hear from you as well about this.
For sure. So we do events in all shapes and sizes, right? So I think what we try to do is keep it very simple, because as I tell everybody on my staff, we're not getting paid when we're setting up and breaking down. So like if we have a big elaborate display, and I know farmers market managers love a big elaborate display, but at the same time, it's a lot of extra work. So there's a happy medium there. And I think as long as you're showing through your branding, like we have our tent and we have our banner, and then we have our tables. And a big thing is like making sure the tables are at the right level. Like if I'm going to a farmer's market that's full of like smaller children, I don't put my table up on lifts. If I'm going to a farmer's market that's like adults, I put my table up on lifts so that the kids, they don't have to like reach down. So knowing your audience, and from operations standpoint, my biggest thing, everybody in my team knows, a checklist is super, super important. So even if you start, like we have different checklists for different things. So I have like a base checklist. It's like the basics, right? Tent, weights, tables, signage. And then kind of next level is different things. So sometimes we do, you know, if we do a market in the city of Boston, there's a lot more regulations around what you have to do than if I'm doing it down the street in Milton. So we have different checklists for every place. And even though it might seem silly to put like bring tape or bring your iPad, sometimes it's, you know, I was packing for an event this weekend, and I'm thinking about the fact that my freezer's on the fritz. We're about to do this big Boston Calling event this weekend, and I forgot to send somebody with change, literally. And I was like, how could I have done this? Like, you know, I've been doing this long enough. I was so embarrassed, right? But it can happen. So give yourself a checklist so that you can make sure that you bring all the things you have to bring, because remember, you're leaving your home base and you're bringing your whole thing there. And so as long as you prepare yourself or maybe your staff to have everything that they could possibly need, then you're in good shape.
Yeah, thanks so much, Heather. And Uli, anything to add? I know, especially because your product needs to be temperature controlled, or anything else about kind of how you all do events from an operations standpoint?
So I want to kind of stress what Heather said: checklist, checklist, checklist. It is so easy to forget something so key like change. You know, you have to make sure You have your little, because farmers market's very cash based. It's very easy. Oh, we didn't bring a roll of quarters. And then you're going around vendor to vendor begging for favors. Also, I'm a big proponent of mise en place. So everything in its right place, in everything. We have a teeny tiny storage unit where we keep our farmers market catering event set up. And it's in the same sequence as what we load into our truck. So during the pandemic, we were very lucky to buy a used pickup truck. Was a 7-foot bed as opposed to the standard 6-foot bed. And we have optimized how we load it in and how we load it out. It saves on time, it saves on confusion. Sometimes it's not good to be OCD, but when it comes to event planning, catering, farmers markets, your details have to be just perfected. And that way your staff is not experiencing uncertainty. You know, they know everything's in the right place. It's not just for the company, it's also for the staff. You try to take headache out of these events as much as possible, just to keep everything organized and everyone happy.
Definitely. That's so smart. The load in, load out order that you just described is like, that's brilliant. I love that you do that. That's got to help out so much.
I'm so jealous of that. I wish I did that.
All right.
My staff wishes I was less, I guess OCD is the word. I don't know. Everyone's like, Uli, take it down 5 notches. I'm like, no.
But you're running it tight. I mean, everything's coming through really great. So I think it's fine. All right. So moving right along, I'd like to, now that we've heard from both of our entrepreneurs here, I'd like to shift perspective a little bit to the farmers market groups, community groups that organize farmers market a little bit. So Sheree, from that farmers market perspective, how would you describe an ideal vendor? How can business owners, make themselves into kind of the ideal vendor to work with?
Well, first of all, I wish Heather and Uli were both in Chicago, because I'd have them at my market in about 4 seconds. Just the fact that you're giving so much thought to your customer, the neighborhood that you're going to be in, and then also using it to your business's advantage as you develop it. So whether you're a startup that's just going out there for the first time to see how will people respond to what it is that you're providing, to somebody who's maybe been in business for a long time, adjusting what you're bringing and what you're doing, staying within your mission and what your business is here to provide, while addressing the community that you're in. I mean, I think that's just like the perfect combination. I think one thing in Chicago we're really lucky about is a lot of our vendors and management develop working relationships. I have heard that around the country that's not necessarily the case, but surely here it's been an important element of working together in terms of helping that vendor scale up. Because I mean, kind of our goal is not only that our community can procure the food that they're looking for, but that the businesses that are coming to the market and vending there are going to be able to achieve their goals with that business as well. So working together to help each other understand where your business is wanting to go and what that market is wanting to achieve, I think is an important element that sometimes can get lost in the shuffle. In a kind of like, in a funny kind of anecdotal way, when I first started a farmer's market about 12 years ago, I learned that vendors would get very upset if I moved their location. And I would maybe I would move them maybe because I saw that there was either they weren't getting enough traffic and somebody else had too much. So I would kind of like try and reorganize. And that way it never dawned on me in the early days that I should talk to the vendors about this before I made the change. And there were a lot of tears and a lot of anxieties about that. But over the years, we were able to develop a good working relationship where when I wanted to see a change like that, I would just go to the vendors and say, you know what, I think if I put Uli next to Heather, it's a natural fit. And so I know it's different, but let's try it out for a week and see what happens. So finding ways to work together to help everybody achieve those goals, I think is really the goal of the market. And of course, I just want to say too, going out there every week, it's an act of courage on all of our parts at this point. back to your opening comments, Meredith, the fact that you guys are out there, we're out there, our customers are coming out. This is an important gesture on all of our parts. So working together to make it optimal for everyone is a real goal.
Yeah, that is so important, Sheree. I really appreciate the focus on that two-way communication, and that, you know, seeing it as a collaborative relationship for the good of the market, of the business, but also for the broader community. Absolutely. I just think that's so important. Thank you. So thinking about that sort of engagement with customers, I'd love to come back to Uli and Heather here. How do you all think about strategies for getting that foot traffic involved and kind of engaging with customers at these events or festivals, you know, pop-up shops, markets, that kind of thing? How do you get people involved with your brand, you know, right from the first time maybe that they see you? Uli, let's start with you on this one, and then we can hear from Heather about customer engagement.
So in the case of farmers markets, it's always samples. Samples. You have to give away, especially when you're first starting out, you have to give away a lot of free stuff. It can be a sample, it can be a scoop. Hey, if you're having an incredible conversation, it could be a whole pint. Back when we first opened our gelato shop in 2014, a lot of neighborhood ice cream stores would limit samples to 3 flavors. And I told my staff, I don't care if somebody comes in and tries all 24 flavors. You have to be, and it, you know, people would be like, but it adds up to 2 scoops or something. I said, it doesn't matter. And for years, that strategy really helped in our favor. When you finally build a brand to a point where, you know, I would still say always give out free stuff, but when you build a brand to a point where, you know, it speaks for itself and it has that reputation that it carries with itself, yes, maybe that's a different story. But you have to give away free stuff, not to your detriment. I'm just going to really quickly mention, I was listening to a podcast yesterday about Ben and Jerry's. I always try to like learn about ice cream world, and there's this incredible podcast out there, and they were talking about how in the beginning Ben and Jerry's, when they first opened their scoop shop, they sold everything at cost. So obviously don't do that, because you're doing a disservice to your business, and you're going to go out of business. Your business is a separate entity that you need to take care of as if the person was needs, but do give away as much free stuff possible. Think about it this way. You could be spending $5 on Google ads, but you could also be spending $5 in cost on giveaway free stuff that might or might not result in that person coming back, buying a scoop, telling their friend, telling their neighbor. I mean, it's free stuff.
Thank you. All right, Heather, how do you think about customer engagement?
So I'm actually going to disagree with you. I feel badly, but and maybe it's because so it's funny because we started in 2014, but we had no storefront, right? So, but you know, we used to do a lot more sampling at the beginning, and I think yes, at the beginning, yes, sampling, and then I quickly started to peel it back. There were certain markets that didn't make sense. It was actually just feeding the birds as opposed to turning into sales. And so we started to pull back from a lot of them. Then with the pandemic, the farmers market guidelines were no sampling. And all of a sudden I said, we're not doing it anymore. So some of it could be the amount of time we've been in business, but I actually found that with the more samples we were giving out, the more people would just crowd around and maybe dissuade the buyers. Now, that being said, it's not saying that one is right and one is wrong, right? For me personally, we have a different price point. So like we sell a pack of 6 for $9, we sell a pack of 2 for $4, and we allow people to kind of mix and match and do a 3 for $10. So to me, if you're not willing to spend $4, you might not be my customer anyway. And I know that sounds like I'm, you know, but at a certain point, like I was bringing so many samples, and we're cutting up all this product and people are coming, and so it also triggers a hand washing sink for us and things like that, like a hand washing station. And again, like the same as you're not making money when you're setting up and breaking down, I have a limited amount of room in my CRV, and I'm not using it for a hand washing station when I can put cookies in it that turns into money. And that's me. right? But I think once you establish your brand, maybe you don't have to do that anymore. And I did find in our one of our bigger markets that started this year, we're finding less and less people are asking for it. So from the samples perspective. Now, in terms of customer engagement, I'm not out there in the aisle, like begging people to come over by any stretch, but, just being friendly, just smiling at people. And I think especially right now where, it's nice to see somebody smile. We maybe missed that the last couple of years. And I always start the conversation with, have you even heard of us? Right? Because then like, oh, I have heard of you. No, I haven't. Well, let me tell you, and get a quick pitch down. So, hey, we're Boston's Craft Cookie Company. And what that means is that we use some high quality, sometimes unusual ingredients. We put them together with a great recipe, make a tasty cookie. For me, there's bonus points if I can get a Boston reference into the name. That always hooks people and they always want to talk about it. And then they look at my flavor list and they're like, what the heck is dirty water? I'm like, oh, that's my kitchen sink cookie filled with Boston based candies. Okay, and now so you've started a rapport with people. And a lot of times if they'll come talk to you, they're not going to leave without spending money.
Yeah, that's definitely true. That personal connection piece. Yeah.
And then the other thing is to get people to the market. We all rely on social media. So I'm constantly, I'll do stuff during the week while we're in the shop. And I'll say, hey, like, oh, check this out. We're making this, like our big thing is this Boston Calling concert that we're doing this weekend. We made a cosmic brownie cookie because a lot of the bands are like 90s based. And we're like, I've never seen anything like it. People are so excited that we're making this cookie. And, so I'm tagging Boston Calling and stuff like that, but I'm getting all these messages from people saying like, when are you going to have it in the shop? I'm not going to Boston Calling. So we're letting people know, but like anything you can let go on social media that you're doing or where you're going to be, then allows, and tagging the right people, right? So tagging the markets, tagging your fellow vendors. So, a lot of times they'll say, right now we're next to a Dorchester-based business, which is a neighborhood in Boston, and it's a dog treat business. So after they finish with Pam, they'll come by my tent and I'll say, oh, well, you just got the dog treats from Dorchester. How about the people treats from Dorchester? And people are like, all right, cool, like, can come over. So I think just being friendly, but also like tagging your farmers markets, tagging your vendors. And I think that makes you, or your fellow vendors, it makes you an important part of that community, and it makes you valuable to the market as well, because you're not making the farmers market manager do all the promoting, because then they can just easily repost.
That's really smart. Yeah. Well, thanks, guys. I like that you both have different experiences that have been beneficial. I think it just highlights that you got to kind of try some things out sometimes and experiment and see what makes sense for your product and for your customer base. So thank you both for sharing. I appreciate it. All right. So next, Angela, I am impatiently waiting. I'm excited to hear from you. So I'm going to bring you in here. I would love to get your thoughts on how a farmers market organization can partner with vendors and customers and other members of the neighborhood there to build connections and broader community.
I thank you, Meredith, for an opportunity to speak to this very broad group. I'm across the country in this room this morning, so I'm very excited about the opportunity. But I just want to tell a quick tale about how our farmers market started. It started as a community project. We had been awarded some funds to start community gardens in the community. We had 32 gardens and we started producing lots of produce. What are we going to do with the produce? As our community here in Chicago on the west side is a food desert. So let's have a farmer's market. Everybody does it. It's a neighborhood market because it was seeded and grown through the neighborhood, and it served as a platform for our hidden entrepreneurs, those grandmas and aunts that made their homemade ice cream and cakes, to have an opportunity to come out and introduce their products to the community. After about 2 years, we were approached by the hatchery to build on the space where we hosted our market. And to be honest, I was instantly peed off because this was a corner in the community that we were cultivating to bring positive program, positive action. And then here come a developer talking about they're going to build. But my mouth is what it is, and I spoke up on behalf of our project and our community. We needed to be a part of it because we got it started there. It may not have been visible unless something positive started happening there. The beauty in it was a food incubator. What a wonderful opportunity for the community to have a partnership where we have food entrepreneurs to give a platform to introduce their products to our community and provide food for our community. So it was a beautiful idea. I remember the development agent that I had talked to the week before going into Thanksgiving, and I called her Thanksgiving morning with an aha. Yes, we're going to do it because it's the next step for our 3-year-old market. We need to grow it and connect it to community, because those 3 years, community just kind of stood around and tried to figure out what we were doing. But when year 6 got here and that development was built, and it presented itself to the community and afforded the community neighborhood market to post up on a beautifully paved plaza with electrical outlets on it. It was just a match made in heaven. We're turning 10 years old this year. We have entrepreneurs from the hatchery under all food covers that are vendors in our market. We have community residents that are artisans that bring their beautiful crocheted items, their jewelry, their soaps and lotions. We even have some kid entrepreneurs that are making products in our market. So we're robust right now, and it means so much to community, especially during COVID when it was so uncertain for the community about food. We were nervous as the market host because so much food was being brought in and free food being distributed in the community if community would show up. But I can say my community, they showed up and they showed out, and they were very happy, and they said it out loud. We're so glad we survived. They didn't say so glad you survived, because it was a community staple, something that they had got adjusted to and used to see it, a place they were used to buying from, bringing their commerce in community. That way they were happy. I was surprised that day, and I was quiet and just nervous. And I came out with the produce cart, and there was a line because we had to do the 6 feet. You know, we had to clean our hands. We had to put the hand sanitizer, get a face mask if you didn't have one. It was like a cattle herd, one way in and one way out, but they kept coming back and kept coming back. And now this year we're turning 10 years old, and they're excited to see the June 11 come and see our market open for the 10th season. So that's something I would like to share with everyone as entrepreneurs. It's an important place to build community in community. And that's a wonderful relationship to have, because lots of partners out there, you never know who you're going to need. But when you have those connections, great things can happen.
Oh, Angela, that is such a powerful story. It's making me feel so good. And I just really appreciate you sharing it with us, because you're exactly right. It demonstrates how powerful these connections can be, and we can help each other through hard things and celebrate together. You know, you got to line out the block because everybody's so excited to be coming back together. And so I wish you all the excitement and celebration on June 11th when you reopen for the 10th season. That's awesome. All right. And so I would like to think about, we're trying to think about the farmers market from lots of different perspectives. I want to think about it from another angle. Uli, I know that you are a farmers market customer for your business. You get a lot of your ingredients sourced from local vendors. So I'd love to hear from you about what do you look for in a supplying partner, kind of from the customer side?
Thank you. It's actually so interesting because I'm coming full circle this year. Farmers market for the past 10 years has been where I've sourced all of my ingredients that could possibly be sourced from a farmer's market. And this summer, we're going to be adopting the strategy of actually going back into the community, going back into the farmers markets as vendors. But for the past 10 years, I have been building relationships with farmers market vendors. And what I understood is that the farmers markets that I go to are kind of, some of them are kind of geared towards wholesale. So it will be me, but then it will be a larger buyer next to me that's buying it for a distribution company. And, you know, let's say I'm buying 50 pounds of strawberries and the person next to me is buying 100 pounds of strawberries, but they're buying it at a lower rate because they have this distribution contract and they're saying, listen, we can't sell it to our customers with this much markup, so, but we're going to be here every week. So give it to me for cheaper. And that way, you know, every week I'm here buying 100 pounds of strawberries or whatever it is. So for me, it was very important to understand that math and to understand how do I come in maybe at a smaller volume, but create goodwill, create that connection between me and the farmer, no middleman, no middlewoman, but also create a commitment. Like the farmers that I've been working with, some of them I've been working with the entire 10 years. Some of them, unfortunately, have changed for other reasons, but you have to go in there and, you know, haggling is important for every business, but you have to haggle with conscience, especially when it comes to farmers markets, because they're the pillar of our community. They're people who are supplying us with good food, good quality food. And without farmers markets, we will be relying on large chains for less quality food. And, you know, to Angela's point, what a beautiful community they have built in the last 10 years. That was all started with, you know, a community farmers market. So that's where I come in as a buyer. And farmers, they remember, and they, you know, during the pandemic, I know that a lot of farmers called me first, where they were like, hey, I have an excess of 200 pounds of this. And I'm going to be selling it at a discount because nobody else is buying. And I thought of you first because you've been so good to us all these years. And, you know, they've been good to me too. Hey, do you want these? And, you know, as I tried my best, and understanding that this is a long-term relationship, to answer those calls. And, you know, they were mutually beneficial. I got the benefit of the first call where they were like, hey, we wanted to call you. And so I was getting something incredible at a better rate, but also the farmers knew they had a partner in me to be able to unload some of the produce that was going to go bad. And a lot of the stuff also that I buy are so-called number twos, because when I make my gelato and my sorbet, I really need ripe fruit. So some of the fruit is picked right before its peak ripeness, so that it can survive a couple more weeks in the refrigerator, or maybe the farmers are making a long trek from, you know, Central California to Los Angeles. So number twos are the kind of thing you have to sell them right away. So all of the farmers that I work with, that they have a partner in me, because I'm making a frozen product. So I can buy number twos, puree them, turn them into gelato or sorbet, freeze them right away. Therefore, I'm not going to be wasting, they're not going to be wasting their produce. They probably would have thrown it out or composted it anyway. And but all of this took a long time. Like some of these relationships happen over years, you know. So you really have to cultivate those relationships for many, many reasons, but also that's what my company is. That's the DNA of what I do, is work with farmers, because I strongly believe that farmers market fruit and buying directly from vendors is better for not just my product, but for everybody involved in the transaction, especially the customer.
Yeah.
Can I add on to that?
Please do.
Real quick?
Yeah, for sure.
Just because, like, I buy from a lot of our vendors as well. And so, like, you know, I make a cookie with the hot sauce vendor that's across the way from me. And you know, I make cookies with the nut guy from down the path, right? And so not only being able to do that, but to tell people like, hey, I use this hot sauce, which is Massachusetts grown peppers, or like I use these nuts that are, you know, roasted here and, you know, just down the road in Somerville. Like people love that, because especially if they're walking by with that person's product, it's easy to pull them in and say, oh, you just got some Q's nuts. Guess what? I have this cookie and it's made with their nuts. And people are like, I love Q's nuts. Or they might, you know, buy my cookies first and say, oh, and I'll say, hey, you should, if you like this, you should go down the hall, you know, down the path and go see my friend at the, you know, at the nut tent. And so like that, and people love that. People want us to all, like, they have this thought that we're all buddies. And I think for the most part we are. If a good running market, functional marketing does. But if you can cross use your products together, people get bananas for it. They love it. And it only helps both of you, right? So like someone who maybe didn't know about Q's Nuts but loves top shelf cookies now has become a Q's Nuts fan, or vice versa.
I'm going to add one more thing, actually.
Sure.
Heather, you brought up such a good point. I ran to my freezer to get 2 of my pints. So I have these little stories on every single one of my pints. So this is olive oil gelato. I don't know if you can.
I love it.
So for every single flavor, I have a little story. And in some of my stories, I print the name of the farm, which is really scary because I'm committing to, you know, however many pint containers I get, let's say 5, 6, 7, 8,000. I'm committing to, I don't have a problem committing, but sometimes farmers don't have the harvest. But it's very important, you know, Heather, to your point, is cross-promoting. And what I haven't really talked about is stories. But you know, when you're at the farmer's market and a customer passes by and you say, hey, this is my gelato, this is what I do. And by the way, do you see this? The olive oil came from that table over there. You know, we go to their farm during the olive harvest, we see the milling process. And we do. We go to this olive oil farm that we've been partnered with 2 hours away from LA in Bakersfield. Every single olive harvest, they invite us to see the milling process, which is one of the coolest things I've ever witnessed in my life. I bring my kids and show them how olives are harvested, washed, milled into olive oil. And then, you know, at every opportunity, especially when you're talking to customers, you point that back out, and that creates so much more synergy and just community. Really what it comes down to is community.
Thank you both so much. This has been really wonderful to hear the firsthand stories and the firsthand experiences from everybody, really. And so I'll wrap up our questions that I had thought of ahead of time with one last question that I'd love to hear from both Sheree and Angela on, and just kind of wrapping up with some advice. What advice do you all have for vendors who are looking to get into markets or looking to grow their presence in the community through the market? And Sheree, let's start with you on this.
Sorry about that. I hit the chat instead of the microphone.
I
mean, I think,
why don't we do?
Know where you're going. Like, you know, so a lot of our vendors maybe are, if they're value added products, they're from Chicago or nearby, so they may know the community. But most of our farms, you know, we're in the middle of Chicago, so they're coming from outside of town. So just like take a minute or two to like learn a little bit about the community so that you're not surprised. Like Heather was saying, you know, that carrot cookies wouldn't sell at one market, but they go like crazy at another one. You might not know that depth of information about a neighborhood before you start going to the market, but you should definitely know, you know, what the price point is that people are looking for, maybe what cultures are in the neighborhood. Like we have, our neighborhood is very common for people to move here when they first immigrate to the country. So we might have people asking for zucchini leaves instead of zucchini squash, because, you know, there's African stews that use the leaves instead. So again, maybe talk to the management, get a sense of who are the customers and what are they looking for. And I think like the other thing that also hearkening back to something Heather said earlier about a big fancy display. We actually had a bunch of Loyola marketing students do a study of all the Chicago markets a couple of years ago. And they found that most people respond to handwritten signs. Nicely handwritten, but handwritten signs. So just a little insider intel. Okay, Angela, you should talk now.
I think trusting the market manager for being there for the vendors. For us, it's very important to just not look at the application of the vendor, but to make a connection so that we'll know what their needs are. How did you find us? Why are you wanting to be here with us? So that that relationship is established coming in, and to explain, we're here to help you. Most market managers are underpaid for the type of work that they need to do to bring that community together. And once the vendors have a clear understanding that we're doing this for your benefit, because what you earn in your booth is what you earn and take home for your life. We don't get any of it. Most markets, well, I know my market charges a very, very, very modest price to be able to come and have your tent set up, your table set up, have everything ready for you except for your presentation and your product. So there's some trust there because I'm intentional about critiquing my vendors. You know, you need to not sit down behind your booth all day. Nobody's going to stop because you're not looking like, come and see me. You're like, I'm tired, let me sit down. I'm not saying don't sit down, because if you're a 4 or 5 hour market, you need to have a little break in there, but you need to look like you're ready to receive people so that they'll know. Don't just let people walk by, excuse me. And samples are really is important. The pandemic didn't make a difference. People knew the product, so they still came to the market. We're back and able to open up a little bit more. Maybe by the end of the year, we can have some food demos, which draw people as well. But just to rely on that market manager and be friendly so they can be friendly back, so that relationship can be established and you can be welcomed into their community.
That's wonderful. Thank you both so much. I think those are really important things to keep in mind. All right, so now I'd love to turn to some questions from the folks who are joining us today. So anybody has questions for Sheree, for Heather, for Uli, for Angela, for any and all, please type those into the chat and we will get to as many of them as we have time to. So we had a couple of questions, kind of logistical questions come in for you, Heather. We had somebody is wondering how many employees you have, and then also how you deal with leftover cookies that you don't sell at the market.
Sure. So I have 7 employees now. It's me and my full-time manager, who I just was able to hire last year when we opened our retail shop. I have the rest is part-time. So it's production and counter staff, but we also get them out and about over the summertime, because actually our neighborhood quiets down very, very much in July and August. So I'm like, send them out, do market, so that way we keep everybody working. And then in terms of leftover cookies, so our cookies are sold packaged. So there's a date on them. And so we're able to shuffle them through. We actually purposely have our farmers market schedule in a way that, like, you're kind of, you know, we're baking for 2 at a time. So for the most part, they're pretty good. But we did actually in our retail shop use a food waste app called Too Good to Go. And the sad, it sounds awesome, right? Because it's like, oh, great. Like people can come in and buy bags of cookies, like $12 worth of cookies for $4. And it would be like our day old or maybe brokens or whatever, things we can't sell. Which was really going great until people started to leave us bad Google reviews. They're like, these cookies are broken. They're old. Like, okay. So we had to take ourselves off the app because it was hurting our online reputation. However, this is where community comes in. I've gotten to be very friendly with a city councilor recently in Boston, and I was at her birthday party the other night, and she introduced me to somebody who runs a senior food pantry just down the street. And so this is great because she told me all the seniors get all the staples that they need, but they don't really get anything special. And I said, fabulous. Once a week, so at night, like we'll put them in the freezer. Once a week, I'm going to drop off special treats for you, Miss Shirley, and your all your seniors. And that makes me happy because I don't like to see things go to waste. And I know, especially right now, our seniors have been so isolated. And so to give them something special is really important to me. And I know my staff, like everybody screamed when I said we made this connection. So I think if you look around for opportunities, there are places to send your, you know, maybe the stuff that you wouldn't sell to customers. And I know a lot of farmers markets can partner with organizations that will come pick up at the end of the day. So that's something you want to like ask the questions of the market managers if it's something that you're concerned about food waste, to ask them if they have anything or start to look, because then you make yourself valuable if you connect your market manager to an organization that can do this.
As a side note, I buy broken cookies and put them into my cookies and cream gelato. So
That's how we started making cookie fraps in the shop. I was like, we'll just save the brokens, and you know, we crumble them up and put them into fraps in the shop. And that's, you know, that's how you do it. Like find ways to use that product, right?
If I were in Boston, I'd pick them all up.
You and I would be good friends, I could tell.
Oh my God. We could make sandwiches at the farmer's market. That would be amazing.
Oh,
Yes.
so good. Oh, man. All right, before I get too hungry and distracted, another question that came in, and this one I think will be a little bit difficult because everybody lives somewhere different and every city is a little bit different, but we had a question come in about the permitting and licensing that's needed to work at a farmer's market. And so I think that, like I said, would be really specific to every person's location. But Sheree, I'm wondering if you could share just sort of like a top line, what should people look into, or maybe like what office is a good place to start and ask those questions?
Yeah, it's hard to know across the country where to start, but I will say that you want to go in with, I'm assuming that everybody on the call is beverage or prepared food, artisanal food in some way. So we're not talking to farmers now. So you want to have your food served sanitation training in place. You want to be working in a certified kitchen. If you don't have your own, a shared one like Heather described. You want to have a copy of the lease that you have with that kitchen that you can share with the market itself to prove that you're working in a legal environment and that's been recently permitted. I think you also need to look out to see in Chicago, you have to do, in addition to the regular food sanitation, you also have to do summer festival sanitation training. Just because the city still thinks of farmers markets as events, even though we've been identified as essential food businesses. But hey, that's another story for another day.
I thought Boston was tough, man.
Anyway, but then it becomes very individualized. I think maybe a little bit too much. So depending on where you are, you could go to the Farmers Market Coalition might be a good place to start since they're a national organization. The USDA is hard to navigate. So I would say maybe that coalition would be a better choice. You could see if your state has an Illinois a farmers market association like we do in Illinois. And then also know where in your state the rules and regs come from. Again, in Illinois, the state may have a big umbrella of things that they require. And but in Chicago, Illinois is what they call like a home rule state. So the city can add stockpile of other criteria on top of the state criteria. So just know like where's the bottom line and who do you need to pay attention to get the full spectrum. Oh, and insurance, of course. Everybody's going to want to see certificates of insurance, liability insurance, and things like that. So that's what's on the top of my head.
I think too, like this is part of what your farmer's market manager does, right? Like they're the expert in this. And so like, yes, you want to make sure that you're like licensed to do this business to begin with, because if you're not, if you're just like making stuff out of your house, unless, you know, everybody's rules are different, but that you're licensed to be able to do this. If you work with your farmer's market manager, they know immediately. They're like, here's the 6 things I need from you, right? And so a lot of times it comes from your board of health and things like that, because your board of health is going to want to see all that stuff. Your farmer's market manager is going to want to make sure that you're legit and that you have the insurance for your business. So, I mean, relying on your farmer's market manager. And I think like with me, I always say like, hey, I don't know, tell me what you need. Because I think if you come off with the approach, like, hey, I want to do things right. Tell me what's going on, what you need from me. Let's take it forward. I know this year, like I've been pulled in so many different directions, and a lot of markets that I've done business with for years. I finally just sent every single one of my market managers an email and I said, listen, I've been crazy. I probably owe you something and I'm really sorry. Can you just tell me what it is? And I promise today I will take care of it. And I think that's, again, it's being a good partner, right? And making sure that all your I's are dotted and cross T's, or whatever that saying is.
Yes, I think that's exactly right, Heather. I mean, just being willing to reach out and ask those questions and be sort of upfront about needing some pointers, because it's different everywhere you go. Every state and city is different. Every market might be a little bit different in how they want things. So it's definitely important to ask those questions.
I'll add just one thing. Local health departments. So for us, it's LA County, Los Angeles County. On their website, they usually have a section for farmers markets.
Oh, perfect.
So if you need a hand washing station and everything else. And one more thing, I'm in dairy. If anyone is doing dairy, you need to find the regulatory body for dairy. For me, it's not Los Angeles County, it's the state of California, Department of Food and Agriculture. So then you reach out to them. Also, call them. Pick up the phone and call them. I guarantee you will find a good person who will not only be willing to speak to you, but email you all of the links.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. Well, thank you all so much for being engaged in the chat. Lots of great questions. We didn't have time to get to all of them because so many people are interested in learning and hearing all the wisdom from the 4 of you. So thanks everybody for being so engaged. I'm looking at the clock and it's time for us to wrap up, but I do want to drop a couple of extra links in the chat so we can keep the learning going, keep these conversations going. So the first is everybody is more than welcome to sign up for a one-on-one coaching phone call. If you need some business coaching on all sorts of topics, you can follow the link I just dropped, and our Brewing the American Dream partners and experts will be happy to speak with you one-on-one, answer some questions about your business. And then just a whole host of other broad resources are available on the Brewing the American Dream program's website. So please take a look at all of those things. We have to wrap up this conversation, but the learning really doesn't have to stop ever. You can get in touch with us and we can help you out. So Angela, Heather, Sheree, Uli, I really appreciate your time. I want to thank you so much for helping us learn about so many different facets of farmers markets and why they're so critical to our communities and how we can all really contribute to their success. Thank you so much for sharing your insights. And again, thanks everybody for joining with us today. I hope you found this information helpful and you feel more prepared to really have a strong impact at your farmers markets this season. So thanks again, and we will see you next time. Bye-bye.